Greetings, my name is Monty Martin.
And I'm Kelly McLaughlin.
And we are the Dungeon Dudes. And today, we're asking that wild question, what would happen if every player in the party decided to roll up a monk?
The first thing that comes to my head is because we have turtles in D&D that we should probably be playing the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Well, let's cue up Everybody Was Kung Fu Fighting and dive into it. There's a lot to discuss, so let's get rolling.
As usual with our Everybody Plays a Singular Class videos, we're looking at a party of 4 characters. Everyone has to play the same class, there's no multi-classing allowed, and no duplicate subclasses, so we have to pick 4 different subclasses, and we might talk about some different combinations that we might want to put together. The party needs to be able to perform, or at least we're going to discuss how they would perform in all 3 pillars of play from level 1 to 20. So that's going to be combat, exploration, and social encounters. Then at the end, we're going to rank them and see how they compare to all of the other single party classes.
Throughout the series, we've been super inspired thinking of all the ways that we could build the campaign concept around all the players choosing the same class. And it is surprising just how much inspiration there is out there for an all-monk party. The idea of a group of martial artist fighters all teaming up to take on a villain and save the world is a very, very widespread trope. Beyond the obvious Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which I think we definitely got to have a turtle in here as an homage, at least, if not all of our characters as turtle monks. There's just a lot out there.
I think that if you did want to dive in and play the all-turtle monk party, you could really grab 4 different subclasses, color code yourselves, and I'm imagining that Shredder is an evil shadow monk.
Yeah.
That's kind of the vibe that I get.
Yeah.
Somehow you'd have to maybe tweak a few things so that Shredder can wear armor and still do all of his martial arts stuff.
Yeah.
But I think that you could have the Ninja Turtles versus the Shredder somewhere in there with the Foot Clan of all of the different monk minions. But on top of that, there's so many monk-centric stories that I love. The first other one that comes to mind is I'm a huge fan of Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think everybody would have to play a 4 elements monk, and we might have to tweak a few things, but it's there. Well, most of them would play a 4 elements monk. You could also have a Kensei in there. But
you could, or maybe everyone's going to play an Astral Self Monk, and you're just going to really stand for JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and maybe play with Mercer at the same time, so you can have your real classic. I mean, anime. There's just so many examples that there's too many to list. We could just be here all day talking about all and everything from the very, very serious to the more campy and funny as well amongst those things. I mean, I think of, I don't even know. There's so many examples. I don't know where to actually start as the most prominent anime example, so I'm just going to go with the JoJo reference.
I grew up with Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, even Chuck Norris has kung fu abilities there. Another one that I loved in my teen years was the Ong Bak series.
Oh yeah, nice. I also think of again more Western films like maybe The Matrix or Kill Bill. As really cool examples to draw some inspiration. And of course, that's the cycle of inspiration that you get from this. I actually even think that you could, depending on how far you want to extend like your definition of a monk, I think there's a lot of monastic elements to the Jedi from Star Wars, and other universes. And Star Wars is more of a space fantasy thing than science fiction, so the parallels all very much exist there. The idea of whether you're doing the monastic order of all the monks who are part of the same organization, the same ninja clan, the same monastery, they all train together. Or, you know what? You could even draw inspiration from video games like Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat as well for this too. You could do a tournament arc.
A Mortal Kombat tournament arc where you're like, they're sucked out of their plane of existence and brought into a realm where they have to battle to the death. I guess
perhaps in the respect of the tournament arc, and all of the things. We would be very remiss though if we didn't mention like drawing inspiration from Dragon Ball. I think maybe it's just us as Canadians because we had YTV and like Dragon Ball was like Dragon Ball and Sailor Moon were the two animes that I think hit Canadian kids in the 90s.
Yeah.
And I guess there's even inspiration there too. We talked about Sailor Moon for the Warlocks, but there's just so much there.
I think that another one that pops into my head, and I want to distill this down mostly to its core. Usually when we think of something like Assassin's Creed, we think of rogues, which makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
They're assassins. But the essence of Assassin's Creed is this secret organization that's trying to undo a tyrannical political arc.
Yeah.
And so having a ninja assassin squad who's working in the shadows to try to overthrow a corrupt government, very Assassin's Creed-esque. But that's something that we see a lot in like classic ninja tropes.
Did you ever play like any of the Tenchu stealth assassin games? They were hard. Those go away. Like they were like Dark Souls before Dark Souls, like Dark Souls, Elden Ring, or Sekiro before, like way back. So the long and short of it is there's just so, like, I mean, if you even wanted to extend the metaphor even further, I'm sure that you could make an argument that Mario and Luigi are monks.
There is the one video game that I absolutely loved. Ghost of Tsushima had that sort of samurai element to it.
Yes.
And yes, we do have the samurai fighter again, but imagining that sort of narrative with a group of monks is very powerful.
Yeah, I do think that is one of those things where as you go further afield in media, because monks and martial artists and fighters, like there is a very much a strong overlap in the Venn diagram of like who's a fighter, who's a monk, who has all these things. And I think that it's worth having a very wide definition for what you draw your inspiration from and what characters yes, we could go into the debate is that character actually a fighter and that character actually a monk? And the one archetype that I'd really like to be able to realize in an all monk party that is kind of challenging to make work mechanically in D&D 5e as we get into like how we build these characters is the strength-based monk. And I think that as we start looking across the spectrum of media that we can draw from inspiration from, and then look at what is available mechanically in D&D 5e, I really start to feel the limitation of the what is available for monks, and find myself really wishing that there was an explicitly, hey, would you like to be a strength-based monk archetype? Or would you perhaps want to be the more, like I definitely like how we're seeing maybe this change from key points to discipline points, because I do think that widens it up. And as we look into the future, the future of D&D, I really hope that like there's support for strength-based monks, but not in the form of a subclass, in the form of alternative class features, so you can graft that onto whatever monk you want to play.
I think as like a final point, talking about the overlap of all things, the first thing we mentioned was the Ninja Turtles. But there's arguments out there that you build the Ninja Turtles by having Raphael be a turtle barbarian, Leonardo be a turtle fighter, Donatello is a turtle artificer, and then Michelangelo's the monk.
Or the bard.
So you could have the Ninja Turtles work without even playing a monk. Yeah. And that's kind of the hard part, is that like there's so many versions of martial artists that we've seen in media that you can actually adapt them to a lot of different classes. But the monk does bring the fists and kicks to life.
Beyond even the Ninja Turtles, like you even look at any sort of superhero, Batman. Is Batman not a way of shadow monk? Right?
I would argue that that's one of the closest ways to get to him. But other people, again, have argued fighter, artificer, rogue, and maybe he's kind of in between all of those. Yeah.
And so, maybe there's other ones as well that are way closer. For example, Daredevil, right? Again, it just shows how prevalent the archetype of the unarmed combatant is across our media. So I find with this one, the field is very large, even though there are the iconic examples for us to draw on. I do think that if we're thinking of the campaign concept, the tournament arc is a really cool idea to explore, especially if you wanted to do like the microcosm of this whole thing. But because again, it's so prevalent across media, you realize that literally every fantasy story archetype works with an all monk party.
Yeah, and I mean, like a lot of these stories are either the assassins versus a corrupt government, or in the case of Ninja Turtles, it's a group of ninjas versus an evil group of ninjas.
Yes, or like the rival clans thing. Or, of course, like that shadowy underworld sort of organization where it's like there's several different families. I mean, I think there's also a lot of overlap here with rogues too.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's so much. But all of that aside, it's fertile ground. And it's really exciting, the idea of the whole party playing them. So, what do we actually think our four monks are going to be?
elephant in the room first.
Okay.
You and I created two monk subclasses in our book, Sebastian Crow's Guide to Drakenheim, which is available now for pre-order and coming soon physically. Um, and those two monk subclasses were also you and I, our love letter to the idea that we think that so far monk subclasses have been relatively weak for a class that is kind of middling in general.
Yeah.
And we wanted to create subclasses that put the monk on par with playing in a party with a paladin or a gloomstalker ranger or those sorts of characters. So right away, the Way of the Arcane Hand monk and the Way of the Serpent monk, which is the two that we created for our book, would probably be in my party if we were allowing those. This is kind of the caveat.
Yeah, and I think with those two characters, with our design of both those classes, the Way of the Arcane Hand being a monk with spell casting in the similar vein of the Arcane Trickster or the Eldritch Knight, we did a whole video on that with Colby from D4 Deep Dive, which you can check out right over here, where Colby did a full build on just how much fun that class can be, and also he really made an amazing sustained damage dealer. I think one of his top sustained damage dealers was based around that class. And we actually don't think that's inappropriate for the power level of a monk overall. So we were quite proud of that. And with the Way of the Serpent monk, you've got a monk that can actually use polearms and benefit from things like Great Weapon Master, and also be a really cool damage dealer and utility battlefield controller. So but in the interest of being a little bit more objective, we're going to give the honorable mention to our two subclasses, set those aside, and look at the official content so that we can actually dive into this.
I think that when we look at the official content, the first one that jumps ahead of everybody else is going to be the Way of Mercy monk.
I agree. I think the touch of life and death and bringing our Way of Mercy monk actually is a pretty good damage dealer. But it also brings that much needed support and very specifically the healing ability into the party, just along with being most broadly, I think probably the strongest of the monk subclasses.
I think that it's contending for one other great damage dealer, but the fact that it is a great damage dealer plus additional support in the way of healing, and also it has that really cool ability to end effects on your allies.
Yeah.
Those two are going to come into play a lot, especially if we're all monks. You do as a monk have like the ability to resist diseases and things like that. And you do get a lot of those, but if you're frightened or charmed or anything of that nature, the Way of Mercy monk can help out and heal you if you need it. Especially
when those fear and charm effects also come with some form of incapacitating you, because even though monks do have things like evasion and stillness of mind and whatnot, ultimately, if there is an effect that prevents you from acting, it's much more difficult to get out of those effects on your own as a monk. I also think, and you've played this monk, we've seen it in many of our campaigns, the Way of Shadow brings so much utility and mobility to the all monk party, especially in the stealth and infiltration capacity, just with that small list of spells that it can cast.
The Way of Shadow monk later gets abilities to teleport if it's in darkness, turn invisible in darkness. You get all of your good monk stuff as well. But on top of that, this really doubles down on the stealth aspect of the monk. So if you talk about the well-rounded party being like your fighter, rogue, wizard, and cleric, then the Way of Shadows fills the rogue type of monk.
Totally.
It's the stealth.
Yeah. And we're also going to have things like Pass Without Trace, and this monk can also turn themselves invisible. And I do think that as far as being able to have that wide utility for your party, somebody that can teleport and somebody that can turn invisible just give you so many problem-solving tools in your party that those are things that I look for really, really early on when I'm building a party. So we get those now. And I do think that as well, Pass Without Trace, giving that massive bonus to stealth, is really going to help us with that whole ninjas slipping in under the cover of darkness sort of thing, which I really like. Like, I think everyone wants to take proficiency in stealth.
Yeah, if you're doing like the nighttime ambush, then the Way of Shadow Monk is leading that mission.
What are we going to put in next? Because I feel like after the Way of Shadow and the Way of Mercy, I kind of don't know. Like, for a long time, the Open Hand was the strongest monk subclass, but considered the strongest one. But I feel like now the Way of Shadow, I like it more than the Open Hand. Certainly like it more than the Four Elements. So
I know what I would put next, and that's the Way of the Astral Self.
Okay.
The main reason, or not the main reason, but one of the key things that jumped out to me when I was reading The Way of the Astral Self is that one of the downfalls of the Way of Shadow Monk is they get the ability to cast darkness, but they can't see in their own darkness.
Yeah.
And that always bothered me. I wish that they had given the Way of Shadow Monk an ability to see in their own darkness. But the Way of the Astral Self has an ability to see in magical darkness.
And of course it is Star Platinum. Like yes, it is Jotaro. So like that's just how you're going to play that character, right? And do your best, to do Matt Mercer's performance.
And I do think it's amazing though that like you have a lot of options here for who the frontliner is, but I think the Way of the Astral Self is actually an excellent frontliner. They have abilities that allow them to boost their AC, deflect damage, punch at range, and deliver a lot more damage on their punches. And on top of that, if you are the Way of the Shadow Monk and you drop darkness on the Astral Self Monk and let them run in, getting advantage on all of their attacks, you actually have a great play here where the Way of Mercy is kind of your frontline skirmisher. The Astral Self could be a heavy hitter. The Way of Shadows is stealth and utility. I think that that's our good third.
Yeah, I also think that it brings one of those rare social features because it gives itself advantage on insight and intimidation checks.
That's something. They may not be able
not nothing.
They can't talk people into things, but they can yell at people.
Yeah.
And
again, appropriate if you want to be Jotaro. Okay, so after the Astral Self, I really would love to have like the Drunken Master in here, but I think the Kensei is the last one that you got to get in.
The Kensei, I do agree. I actually also was considering the Drunken Master because it's so fun, but I think the Kensei is our strongest choice.
And I think one of the things that you could do as an option with the Kensei is because you can use a longbow, you could actually get a sharpshooter in here.
Not only can they be the sort of back line firing in ranged attacks, they also have a lot of abilities that add damage and precision to their ranged attacks.
Yeah, in ways that I think just work out better than, say, the Sun Soul.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's the 4-person party. We have our Way of Mercy Monk, we have our Shadow Monk, we have our Astral Self Monk, and our Kensei Monk.
Which one would you make the turtle?
The Kensei. No.
Okay.
They're arranged. The Astral Self?
Maybe. This is one of the other ways that I think this party could diversify a little bit more and pick up some much needed extra attributes. Because depending on your ancestries, like, I think definitely with an all-monk party, I would be much more open as a DM to allowing people to play Aarakocras or Owlins, and because that brings flight to the table. You could play other ancestries that are going to give you more spell-like abilities, like Fearbogs, or maybe someone plays a fairy. I don't know. But this is another place where you can just pick up those much needed extra features that you're going to need depending on where the campaign is going to go as well. So like maybe we do that. We have like the Aarakocra. Do we just go full like animal person party and have a Tabaxi monk, an Aarakocra monk, a Turtle monk? What?
There's the Owlin, there's the Haragon.
Yes.
The Haragon?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be cool. Okay, so we have a total monk menagerie.
Yeah.
Of a party. That actually could work really, really well, I think. I do think that having the Aarakocra monk in the party brings a really critical source of flight.
I would make the Kensei the Aarakocra because then I can ranged attack from the air. That could work.
Yeah, and because the Way of Shadow,
the Haragon is the Way of Shadow.
Yes, Shadow Bunny.
Yeah. And then our Turtle Astral Self, and then our Way of Mercy. What was the other one that you said?
The Tabaxi.
The Tabaxi.
Well, the Tabaxi could also be the Way of Shadow.
True.
Right? Yeah, that could work really, really well as well.
Dealer's choice.
Dealer's choice. Way of Mercy, somehow Way of Mercy feels appropriate for the rabbit. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a lot of ways that you can do that, but that could be that is actually a fun,
you know
that feels like the premise for a great kid's show.
You know how the Way of Mercy wears a mask?
Yeah. They
wear a rabbit mask, and then finally after a while they take it off, and they're actually just a rabbit. It wasn't a mask.
Behind the mask is another mask. Of course, there could be other interesting things that you could do with this, like playing some elves to get elven accuracy.
Yeah, that could be cool.
Especially if you're doing like some of the more again, we'll talk about this in the strategies, but because we do have darkness, an interesting strategy for this party is for everybody to take the feat that gives you a fighting style to get blind sight. And then you can all take advantage of the darkness.
Which could be awesome.
Yeah.
A bunch of monks, they throw down, basically it's throwing down a smoke bomb and fighting in it. Yeah.
What is Ra's al Ghul's organization? Is it the League of Shadows?
The League of Shadows.
Yeah, I think they are the League of Shadows.
Nope. I'm spelling everything wrong here.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, the thing that I'm still disappointed about here is I still don't know. My temptation here is to take the Turtle and make them a strength-based monk.
We looked at this.
We did.
Giving them a big weapon doesn't work.
Yeah.
You could make them a strength-based monk.
You could, but the idea was, is there a way to get a monk that can maximize their use of their monk features while using a heavy weapon?
I don't think so.
And the thing with it is that a bunch of monk features, like your martial arts feature, and unarmored defense, which you might not necessarily need unarmored defense if you're going with a Turtle, they require you to be be fighting unarmed or wielding a monk weapon. And we haven't been able to find a way to make a heavy weapon a monk weapon outside of our subclass that we made.
Yeah.
And so that limitation where and basically everything, like the Kensei and the dedicated weapons features, the optional class feature, all basically say it can't be a heavy weapon. Like the rules are kind of baked to say, hey, monks, you can never benefit from Great Weapon Master. And what I would like to be able to do is have a Turtle monk that wields a greatsword and takes Great Weapon Master and can hit people with their sword and then still kick them. Like, let us know if you found a way to do this.
And Colby, if you're watching this video, you can come on back here and help us build a heavy weapon using monk, because somehow I just assume that you're going to have a way to do it.
Yeah, and it's also where I feel like with Baldur's Gate 3, there were so many ways to do, like the way they changed Tavern Brawler that made this all more viable. You can actually use a shield as a monk and wear armor as a monk and still benefit from most of your abilities, whereas in current 5th edition you can't. So ultimately I think we're going to go with our
Core four.
The core four, everyone's still going to be your pretty classic dexterity, wisdom based monks. We're not going to try to do anything super fancy by going with the strength based route. We're still going to have a turtle for style points, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So looking at the pillars of play, the first one is combat. And actually, an all monk party is not going to be too bad in combat. We talk a lot when we're comparing the monk to other classes about how they aren't as great in combat as a paladin or a fighter. But when you have 4 monks, the mobility and ability to be where you need to be, like battlefield positioning and mobility, is off the charts. No monk is stuck where they don't want to be.
Yes, because everyone in your party is probably faster than your foes. Especially if a bunch of you take the mobile feat, you'll really be able to navigate around. And, well, a single monk can blow through their key points really, really quickly if they're spamming Stunning Strike. A party of monks that all can take short rests together and meditate together and get their key points back reliably, that are all on like that same monk rhythm, I actually think that the all monk party can basically overwhelm the opposition with stunning strikes. Like eventually every enemy is going to fail that saving throw. And that can kind of be your party wide strategy, is just get everybody completely stun locked. And are you going to burst down your enemies super fast? You're not going to action surge on everybody like the fighters. You're not going to drop a ton of smites like the paladins are. You're not going to have the bunch of sneak attacks up front like the rogues will. But you're going to be able to get in, close the distance, and stun everybody.
You know, okay, I've never seen an all-monk party in play, but what I have experienced is when you did a group of enemy monks versus our party, and one of us got stunned, surrounded, and punched like 20 times in a single round of combat by 4 or 5 monk enemies. And to reverse that, if they focus fire and they stun an ogre and then all the monks just let loose on it, that ogre's dead.
Yeah, because they're getting a lot of attacks with advantage. Again, are their individual attacks maybe doing a lot of damage? No, but it's still a lot of attacks coming in. And I actually think that the inverse might work here. I think my combat strategy with the all monk party would be whoever's acting first, their job is to stun as many foes as they can. And then whatever foe doesn't necessarily get stunned, the rest of the party gangs up on them. And because you know that you're going to be able to, like, it's almost a counteraction to that normal strategy of focusing fire, where when it comes around to your turn, you're going to know, okay, my ally stunned that enemy, so we don't need to worry about them for this turn. So I'm going to go over to somebody who isn't stunned and try to stun them. And if it doesn't work out for me, then the next party member is going to try that too. So I think that your group can actually assess, are you all going to gang up on a single foe? Or are you all going to spread things out and keep everybody incapacitated?
Not to mention another thing that this party excels at, we talked about the mobility, but just to actually lay out an example, if you have a big enemy, let's say you have like an ogre, and then there's people in towers firing down at you. Monks can run up walls.
Yep.
Monks have extreme mobility. So one monk runs forward, stuns the ogre. 2 more monks run up the towers and are taking care of the ranged enemies that you were like, oh, they're in towers, they're fine. They're not fine from the monk. The monk can run up those walls, get to the top of the tower, and beat the heck out of the archers or the whatever. So like, no matter where the enemies are on the battlefield, the monks can get there and handle the situation.
Well, and this is where as well, as soon as you start getting to the point where the monks in your party have movement speeds of 50, 60, 70 feet, which is pretty attainable, especially if people are taking the mobile feat. If your monk has that movement speed that has been boosted up in that way, you end up in a situation where you can run up to somebody, punch them, and because you've got the mobile feat, you have enough movement speed to still attack them, The mobile feat prevents them from making an opportunity attack against you. And now you have the movement speed to get away from them, and they would have to spend their entire movement to get up to you.
It was a great tactic for my
Yeah.
Shadow Monk, as I took the mobile
Yeah.
feat and I was able to get in, punch, 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 stun, get out.
And the mental image of that, like, I feel like I've seen that scene in anime of like, here are all the ninjas, they jump out, they punch somebody, and then they're scattered immediately. That's a cool strategy. And so I do think that this party has the like, it has the chops to beat some monsters. And I do think that, like, if you're doing a solo monster, even one with a really good con save, you're just going to get drowned in stunning strikes. And it only takes one failure for the battle to be over.
Not only that, but we talked earlier about the darkness plus astral self, and if people take blind fighting,
Yeah.
you also have all of the monk features like Diamond Soul, Purity of Body, Stillness of Mind, Evasion. In combat, they're actually surprisingly robust considering how much we nag on them usually.
Yeah, like, I think that here's the thing is this is a clear example of like why the monk is only bad in comparison to everybody else, because I think that's where all of these things are really, really cool, but you see how much it's almost like the monks have to work so much harder and do all these cool strategies, because if it was the fighters, they would have action surged and attacked with, like, the fighters just would have like laid out the enemy already, and the paladins just would have smote them into the ground, and the wizards just would have banished them. So like, that's where the gulf in power is. It's like, here's the monks doing all these really, really cool moves and all these cool things, and that's great, but the other classes have already won.
When it comes to exploration, I actually think that we're pretty strong here as well. We're going to have high wisdom, so we're going to have good perception. We also have incredible acrobatics. We can jump, we can run up walls. So the ability to scout and spy and see things, the mobility, not only that, but again, the Shadow Monk comes out swinging here for exploration.
It does. Once again, though, our monks do have to play exploration honestly, for the most part. Aside from some shenanigans with the Shadow Monk giving us invisibility and some limited forms of teleportation, we had to play an Aarakocra to get a reliable source of flight.
But do you need flight if you can run straight up a wall?
Yes, for all those times when you're fighting in floating islands and environments where it's not about the wall, it's about just there's nothing between you and the enemy. Right? Like, if the dragon is flying in the air, there's no walls for you to run up.
Just give me boots of striding and springing.
Right.
Which is a great magic item to give a monk.
Or flying carpets, flying boots.
So you do have to rely on magic items,
you really will there.
We do have Pass Without Trace. We do have great maneuverability, and we do have wall running and water running. I don't think we're not failing at exploration.
Yeah, but it is kind of surprising. You know, another thing that like is common in a lot of martial arts movies is like the notion of like the monks actually having that astral experience or consulting with some sort of spiritual force or having some sort of access to divination magic. And we don't have a lot of that either. So we're really limited in that way. There are some ways that monks can get some of these abilities, but that's a big limitation. Another thing that we kind of lack in the exploration front is like that bleeds over into combat. We don't have a lot of ways to buff ourselves up. We don't have nothing.
Yeah.
Right? I think that we come out ahead of the fighters.
Yeah. We're definitely like middle to high end on exploration.
Right? And I think that aside from the fact that the rogues have better skill proficiency, I think the monks can keep pace with the rogues.
Yeah.
To a certain extent. But they just lack the full-blown power of the spellcasters in this respect. What about social interaction?
This is where we're going to struggle.
This is bleak.
We don't have a lot of charisma. A lot of the monk classes don't have any abilities that help us out with social interactions. Yeah. We don't have even like manipulation of the mind like some of our other weaker classes had.
We could have had a Cobalt Soul in here.
True.
Right? But it's still, and that would have given us like a Zone of Truth like thing, but still like
monks gaining social abilities is sparse.
Most monks, you want to dump your charisma And many monks don't really have much incentive to take a lot of the charisma-based skills. We don't readily have access to spells that help us in social interactions. Sometimes we can get things that give us advantage on individual checks, but it's not really a reliable measure. So you're really going to have to go outside and look at what you might grab through feats and what you might grab through ancestry traits to make up for it.
At least we have some insight.
Yeah.
I mean, that's about
we
all
got
we
insight in acrobatics.
Yeah.
There you go. So as we talked about in combat, chain stunning is a big strategy and trick for this party, as well as their very fast mobility. I think that the ninja infiltration scene where the shadow monk casts Pass Without Trace and we get the darkness rolling and they come all in and just combine both these things is your best way of winning a fight.
That scene of like the group of ninjas without making a sound climbing up onto the rooftops surrounding their enemy, and then all at once they dive in, everybody dies.
Yeah, I just hope that you're the right side of the crazy 888 fight on that one.
As the right side is Uma Thurman.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you know what? That's actually the problem. Is have you ever heard of that theory of the conservation of ninjutsu? That like one ninja is very deadly. 20 ninjas, not so much.
So where does 4 ninjas lie on that spectrum?
Well, I mean, that's where you get the Ninja Turtles, right? Yeah. It's kind of like that idea of like the fewer ninjas there are, the more dangerous they become. The individual ninja is. And the more ninjas you've got, the weaker they are.
I mean, yeah, the Crazy 88 were actually terrible at fighting.
Yes, they were.
They ran in one at a time and were not good. But
yeah, and so
and
so just in terms of that, don't do that martial arts movie thing where everybody goes one-on-one, like gang up, chain stun one enemy, like definitely work together. I think, because I do think that is the biggest thing with this party in particular, is that you are gonna have to do the teamwork thing to survive with this group, because nobody really has the Hail Mary move.
No, it's a lot of teamwork.
Yeah. You know, it's probably even worthwhile for somebody in this party to take Magic Initiate to get something like Bless.
I mean, that could be really handy.
Yeah.
Having a Bless spell on.
Yeah, or just having something like, maybe having something like somebody take the telekinetic feat, or somebody take telepathic, or taking feats like Shadow Touched and Fey Touched to fill in these gaps and at least give you some tricks.
I think that, yeah, when we come to the weaknesses of this party, we've already talked a lot about them, and we've kind of already mentioned that similar to the Rogue party, they want to be stealthy. We talked in the Rogue video about how they work best when nobody knows they're about to attack. I think the monks benefit from this as well. The difference is I actually think the monks come out ahead of the rogues if their ambush falls apart.
Yeah.
Because the monks actually have a lot to do in combat, but I still think their best move is to remain unseen as much as possible. They're great for infiltration or espionage sort of missions. Their weakness is that if a group of enemies knows that they're there, they have to work real hard to pull off their stunts.
You know, another weakness of this party, and we haven't talked about this much for the other parties, it's slim pickings for magic items for monks in the core rules of D&D.
Yeah.
It really is. And it feels like the ones that you really want to have, like a fighter can slap on magic armor and a shield, and that doesn't use up their attunement. They can get a magic weapon that doesn't require attunement and use that. Whereas virtually every option that monks have for boosting their stats or their AC or giving them flight or mobility or something useful is going to require them to use up attunements.
The first few that pop into my head, Boots of Striding and Springing are great. The Cape of the Mountebank and the Cloak of Invisibility is really good.
Yeah, I mean,
Ring of Protection.
You definitely want those things, but it's amazing how quickly they just chew right through up all the attunement slots. And a lot of monks, there are those sort of Magic Fang style like the Amulet of the Fang, I think, which gives the +1, +2, +3 to your unarmed strikes, which a lot of monks really want to have, and you kind of all want to have one. And that's one of your attunements just burned right up there. There are some of the magical tattoos, which can offer some interesting things for monks. But yeah, you really want like a magic item that's going to compensate for your lack of mobility. And this is where, again, homebrewing things and being generous as a DM can give the party a little bit more to work with here. But it is kind of like, if you look at the core rules, like what magic item do you want? Like,
Yeah.
you know, for me early on, I remember giving a monk a flame tongue short sword, and that worked pretty well for boosting their damage. There's like the Staff of Thunder and Lightning, but it does feel like there's not a lot of options.
I do think as a final weakness, we talked about this as well, but at social encounters, they're just going to crumble. So this party does actually do well in the exploration and combat better than the social, but they want to be able to ambush, and you need to be picky with your magic items.
Yeah, I also think ultimately, well, the monks do have a surprising amount of defenses. Like when you stack up the fact that everybody has evasion, everybody has stillness of mind, they've got the wholeness of body thing. So there's a lot of ways to resist charm, fear, poison, disease. Eventually monks they get proficiency in every saving throw. Combined with evasion, that's pretty good, right? But their AC, a monk's AC does not necessarily get that high. Like a monk with a maxed out dexterity and wisdom ends up with an AC of 20, which is fine, but that's equivalent to a fighter with full plate and a shield.
And that takes a lot to max
and
out.
That's maxing out your ability scores, right? So you can get higher than that, but again, you have to, it's reliant on magic items, or taking some feats and other things. So I do think that this party isn't the flimsiest, and the Way of Mercy gives you some recovery methods, but it's not like its defenses are amazing.
So, ranking the all monk party.
Is it the worst party?
No. So
okay, so the question is, which all class party is worse than monks?
When we're ranking, none of them need to be D tier.
No, but is the all monk party the worst party? Is it the weakest one in all pillars of play? I really struggle to think of which party is weaker.
Do you think the all rogue party is stronger?
I think the all rogue party, I like the all rogue party too. Like, this is the thing, I like them all conceptually, and I actually would love to run any of these campaigns. But if we're looking at an objective measuring stick of which one, are the monks weaker than the rogues?
Are the monks weaker than an all artificer party?
I think an all artificer party actually has a lot more going for them, though.
I mean, we haven't done that video yet, so I haven't
that
analyzed it. I'm just trying to think. All barbarians are all fight, no exploration, no. So
I mean, they got something.
They got a little bit.
I'll
give them a C.
Conceptually, everything is S tier.
Always, this is every one of these videos. I love it, and the thing.
But let me put it this way: if you are in a competitive D&D game and your team was going through the Tomb of Horrors and you had to play the all monk party, would you be feeling really good about your chances?
No. What I want to say, I'm giving the all monk party a C. I don't think any party's a D, because one thing that I think is interesting that I'm realizing as we continue this series is that one of the benefits you have is that if all the players of the party are playing the same class, the DM gets to build the entire concept around that. Totally.
And that's the whole thing. It's like, and everyone is on a pretty level playing field. So you don't like, and that's one of those things. Like the monk really feels behind the other characters. But you see how in a vacuum, on its own, like monks together actually, they play.
They're great.
Yeah, there's a game there.
And I think that's the problem, is like we talk about the imbalance of having your monk in a party next to a Oath of Vengeance paladin, a Gloomstalker ranger, a trickery domain cleric, and a battlemaster fighter, and then the monk feels kind of behind all of those.
Yeah.
But when you're playing all monks, none of that matters. The DM gets to design a campaign that's about martial art.
Yeah, and probably in the case of the DM, the broken challenge rating calculations probably don't matter so much with the monks, because you could probably it's closer to the expected, because there's a lot less like there's monks. Just I feel like monks perform so much closer to what they are on the page compared to other classes like wizards and fighters and paladins, where it's just like they can just get keyed up so much more than what the assumptions of the book are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really like this party, and I love some of the concepts we came up with. And as usual, I would love to be in an all-monk short campaign or something. Yeah. Ninja Turtles.
I would play it. I would. Surprisingly, I think I'm more interested in playing in an all-monk party in that campaign than I ever would be playing a monk in any other context.
Do we play the middle-aged martial artist turtles? Middle-aged martial artist turtles.
Middle-aged martial artist turtles. Gonna have a life crisis. Buy a boat. Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
Yeah.
So that's our look at the all-monk party. If you have played in an all-monk campaign or have ideas on what you imagine an all-monk campaign looking like, please tell us about that in the comments below.
The videos that we create on our channel are made possible with the incredible generosity of our Patreon supporters. If you enjoy the work that we do here on YouTube, please consider becoming a patron of the show by following the links right down below.
And if you want to see us getting punched by monks in an actual play campaign, it happens from time to time in our World of Drakenheim, which airs Tuesday evenings on Twitch. You can find all the previous episodes right up over here.
Callie and I have had a ton of fun asking what would happen if all the players played the same class in D&D 5e, and you can find all the other videos we've made on that right up over here.
Please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and ring that bell so that you never miss an episode.
Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time
in the dungeon.